I was born in 1949. Lived most of my life in Maplewood, New Jersey. My mother was a teacher. My father was a salesperson, and since I was in high school, I think I always wanted to be a lawyer. It drove me to make sure I stayed relatively clean in the various activities that I did. I went to law school at GW, George Washington University here in the district. My first job was actually in a small corporate law firm in Atlanta, Georgia. They had a small client, Rollins Protective Services, that was involved in a dispute with Southern Bell, I think was the name of the company in those days. No one else in the firm had ever had any dealings with Washington, and I was a junior associate. It was a small case, so they sent me to Washington, and that's how I became a communications lawyer. It was pure happenstance.
The federal regulatory environment is a very complex and ever-changing one, particularly for dynamic technologies like cellular and mobile and wireless.
Nobody really knew how the FCC would give out this spectrum. We thought that perhaps it would be similar to the way they'd given it out under radio or TV licenses. Throughout the early days of cellular, as it went through all the iterations, as the FCC kept altering the process, Larry Movshin was always in the middle of it.
I got into the cellular industry on the very first day of the applications, June 6, 1982, because our firm's client was the only one that had filed in all 30 markets. And that meant we had to go through 30 hearings or try and settle 30 markets. Through luck, the late Bill Wheatley and Jim Dwyer, the late Jim Dwyer, who was on the other side of one of the hearings, decided that maybe it was time to try and settle these markets and avoid the hearings. They were costly, there was risk. And that was the original settlement on the non-wireline, what was called the non-wireline side. And I think we ended up settling 10 or 12 of those markets, which kept them out of hearing. And as a result of those settlements, we ended up getting into the second and third tier markets, which were the so-called Grand Alliance settlements. Graphic scanning pulled up with a moving truck worth of papers because your application had to have a number of engineering studies, a number of marketing studies, a number of other things involved, and they were literally file boxes for each market. So we had 30 markets. The FCC was overwhelmed with the amount of paper. Two large groups of non-wireline carriers individually recognized that there was probably a benefit to trying to settle. And we ended up creating what became the infamous cellular exchange, where we had a group of settlements, everyone had an interest, they had a group of settlements, everyone had an interest in the markets, and they all got together and started what was essentially a stock exchange of paper changes.
Felt a little bit like the baseball or NBA trading season would be, and Larry was one of the top general managers because he represented a company that had lots of chips.
Folks would show up in New York and they'd start essentially trading pieces of paper. We had to take all those trading slips, if you will, back to my office where my colleagues sat down to figure out whether or not that everyone had traded the right amount, and we got it all together. But over the course of a week or so, we actually were able to find that every piece other than I think 2 had been essentially fully settled. So there was a lot of issues that we were all with a wing and a prayer hoping would work, because the ultimate goal was to get this industry moving, and I'm glad to say we did. I'm amazed. I look back again, it's now 33 years since those first applications, and I'm sure no one who sat around and filed those applications could have expected it would be like this. We see today that a phone that when we first started was attached to a car, now thanks to our millennials and our young generation, it is the way that they communicate entirely. Well, anyone who knows me knows I have a favorite sports team. It's the Washington Capitals. I live and die by them, which usually means in April I die by them, or May, but they're going to get better. And when I'm not working, the likelihood is I'll be on a golf course. If I'm not at the beach in Hilton Head or on a golf course, I'm probably spending my time in New York with the grandchildren. They still love their grandpa, or Poppy as he calls me, or they call me.
Well, I think Larry Movshin is a wireless lawyer's lawyer. I think he deserves all the honor he's receiving.
I'm proud to have called him a friend for more than 30 years.
The whole induction really is quite an honor for me to represent that the working lawyers have added value to the industry, and I really appreciate that. I'm quite honored by it.